The nurse's voice on the hospital phone was urgent, but my son Marcus's response was a dull, cold blow. "I'm busy, Mom. I have an important reservation." In that stark white hallway, under the harsh light, it hit me. Right then, I understood. For Marcus, my only son, my very life or my death, it was just an inconvenience. Just a little snag in his busy schedule. He couldn't possibly imagine that this phone call, those few cold words, would be the absolute beginning of the end. The end of everything he thought was just waiting for him, rightfully his. I spent what felt like forever, just days really, staring up at the plain ceiling of that hospital room. All I could hear was the constant beeping of the monitors, tiny, steady sounds that measured my life, my breath, my beating heart. Every single beep, every soft whir, it felt like it was counting down the time, marking the moments for a decision, a big decision that was slowly, powerfully growing inside me, paying for a kind of love that, well, it only really existed on my part. I knew it right then. The woman who walked into that hospital, fragile and lost, she wasn't going to be the same one who walked out. Not even close. When they finally said I could go, when I was discharged, I came home in silence. The ride home was quiet, and when I stepped back into my own house, it felt different. This house, the one that for so many years had been the quiet stage for all my sacrifices, all the loans I'd taken out for others, all the times I'd just faded into the background. I knew deep down that I had to do something. Not for revenge, no, but out of respect. Respect for my own story, for the life I had lived. He, Marcus, he thought I was fragile, weak maybe. But he completely forgot who I'm 78 years old. My whole life, I was a Portuguese teacher. I spent all those years believing in the incredible power of words. But the truth is, in my own life, I mostly lived with the crushing weight of silences. After my dear husband, Arthur, passed away, my whole world just shrank. It revolved completely around taking care of Marcus, my only son. I sold our car, our family car, just for him. I mortgaged this house, our home, a second time. I even used up all my precious pension savings, all of it, just to finance his various businesses, the ones that, frustratingly, never seemed to work out. For me, in my heart, that was the meaning of being a mother. It was a constant, silent sacrifice. Something you just did without question. My daily routine was simple, you know? It always has been. I'd spend my mornings tending to my plants out on the porch, a little ritual I loved. I'd read my books, losing myself in stories. And then I'd wait. I'd wait for Marcus's Sunday call. It was a given. He always called, and he always called to ask for something. And I always gave in. Our house, this spacious apartment that Arthur and I bought together, with the sweat of a lifetime's hard work, it was always his safe harbor, his place to land. I used to joke, sort of, with him. I'd say, my son, this place, it holds all our family's memories. It's our foundation, you know? I meant it. I kept all the really important documents, all the vital papers, in Arthur's old metal box. It was a heavy green thing. Inside were the contracts, the deeds to the house, all the bank statements. Marcus, he never showed any interest in what he called this old-fashioned paperwork. For him, this house, our home, it was just an asset, just a commodity, something to be used. He had no idea, absolutely no clue, that in those yellowed, brittle papers, it wasn't just the past that was written. It was his entire future. And mine too. In recent years, things had changed. Slowly but surely, Marcus's visits, they became rare. And when he did come, they were always rushed, hurried. He'd show up with his wife, Chloe. She's a lovely girl, but even she and Marcus would barely sit down. Their conversations, they were always about the same few things. A new, surefire investment, that surprise, needed an influx of cash. An unexpected credit card debt that needed to be paid off. The expensive school fees for their children. I felt it every time. I felt like an ATM, not a mother. The coldness, that distant look in his eyes. It was becoming clearer and clearer, more visible every time I saw him. And Chloe, she started making these subtle comments about the apartment. Just little things, but they cut deep. She'd say, "Mother-in-law, this place is just so big for you, don't you think? It must be so much work to clean." Then she'd suggest, ever so sweetly, that I move to a smaller, more practical place, and that they, of course, could manage the property for me. I'd always change the subject, fast, but a pang of anguish, a sharp little pain, would hit me every time. It felt like they were measuring my space, looking at every corner, just waiting for me to leave it, to vacate it for them. The final straw, the one that really broke something inside me, was on my birthday, my 78th birthday. They promised a family lunch, a real celebration, but they canceled at the very last minute. An unavoidable business trip, Marcus said. That night, later, I was just scrolling on social media, looking at pictures, and I saw a photo of them, Marcus and Chloe. They were toasting, laughing at this incredibly expensive restaurant in the very same city. The lie, it hurt more than the oversight, more than them just forgetting me. It was then, seeing that picture, that the true loneliness began to set in. It showed me, right there, that I was already invisible to them, already erased. After I finally left the hospital, still feeling weak, still shaken, the rideshare driver dropped me off right at the entrance to my building. I walked in, so ready to just be in my own apartment. But as I stepped through the door, what I saw, it just paralyzed my feet right there on the floor. Marcus and Chloe were in my living room, and they weren't alone. There was a realtor with them. They were speaking in low voices, quiet whispers, visually measuring every room, talking about the excellent sales potential of the property. The humiliation, it was immediate and silent and absolutely brutal. When they saw me standing there, There wasn't any real surprise on their faces, just a slight, awkward discomfort. "Mom, you shouldn't have left the hospital alone," Marcus said. His voice, it was dripping with this feigned concern. "We were just looking at some ideas to modernize the apartment, for your comfort." The realtor, though, she just looked at me with this clear pity in her eyes. She understood. She knew exactly what was happening. I was being evicted from my own life. Right there, right before my very eyes. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just asked, my voice a whisper, what was happening. Chloe, she took the lead. "Eleanor," she said, her voice so practical. "Let's be practical. You had a health scare. You're simply not capable of living here alone anymore. We're already looking at an excellent senior living facility for you." They had already decided my whole future in my own home, without me. In that exact moment, I wasn't their mother anymore. I was just an obstacle. I just turned, somehow, and walked to my room. I closed the door softly behind me, and I took a deep, shaky breath. The pain, it was immense, a tidal wave of it. But the clarity, that sharp, cutting clarity I had felt in the hospital, it rushed back, and it came back with full, blinding force. The image of them in my living room with the realtor, it connected perfectly to Marcus's voice on the phone. "I'm busy." Suddenly, everything made sense. They weren't worried about my health. Not at all. They were just in a terrible hurry to take possession of what they believed was their inheritance. The next day, I woke up and I felt this strange calm, the calm of someone who had spent a lifetime planning lessons. I knew what I had to do. I called Mr. Henderson. He's been our family lawyer for over 40 years, a loyal friend of my late husband, Arthur. I asked him to come to my house for an urgent and discreet conversation. I didn't say a word to Marcus or Chloe about it. They just kept acting like they were the new owners of the house, talking loudly about renovations, new furniture, decorations, as if I wasn't even there. While I waited for Mr. Henderson, I went to Arthur's old metal box, the green one. Inside, right there with the original deed to this apartment, were all the proofs of payments I had made for Marcus. Over 30 years of them. The promissory notes he never paid back. The statements from the second mortgage, the one I paid off all by myself. I wasn't just gathering evidence for a fight. Not really. I was organizing the facts of my own life, the truth of my sacrifices. My name is Eleanor. I'm 78 years old. My whole life, every single weekday, I stood in front of a classroom, teaching Portuguese. I loved it, you know? The way words could open up worlds, the beauty of language, the precision you needed to truly express something. I believed so deeply in the incredible power of words. But isn't it funny how in my own life, in my everyday, I mostly lived with the crushing weight of silences. Not quiet, peaceful silences, but heavy ones. The kind that filled rooms and years where words should have been spoken. After my dear husband, Arthur, passed away, it was like the whole world just tilted. My world, anyway. It shrank down until it revolved completely, utterly around taking care of Marcus, my only son. Arthur was my anchor, my partner in everything. When he left, that void, it was vast. And in that emptiness, Marcus became my focus, my reason. And so I gave. I gave and gave. I remember selling our old family car, the one Arthur loved so much, the one we took on all our road trips. It broke my heart a little, but Marcus needed startup capital for one of his brilliant new ventures. Then, years later, I mortgaged this house, our home, the one Arthur and I bought together. With every penny we saved, every extra hour we worked, I mortgaged it a second time. And my precious pension savings, all of them gone, used to finance his various businesses, the ones that frustratingly, painfully, never seemed to work out. Not one of them. For me, in my heart, that was the meaning of being a mother. It was a constant, silent sacrifice, something you just did, without question. You offered up everything, hoping it was enough, hoping it would make them happy, successful. My daily routine back then was simple, predictable. I'd wake up early, the house still quiet around me. I'd spend my mornings out on the porch, tending to my plants, feeling the cool soil under my fingertips, watching the new leaves unfurl. It was a quiet ritual, a little piece of joy, a connection to something growing, something alive. Then I'd sit inside, losing myself in my books. Stories were my escape, my way of understanding the world and perhaps forgetting my own. But no matter how deep I got into a story, a part of me was always waiting. Always. I'd wait for Marcus's Sunday call. It was a given, as reliable as the sunrise. He always called, and he always called to ask for something. Always. A loan for a new idea, help with an unexpected bill, money for the children's school trip. And I'll always gave in, every single time. Sometimes with a sigh I hoped he wouldn't hear, sometimes with a lump in my throat, but always. Our house, this spacious apartment that Arthur and I bought together, with the sweat of a lifetime's hard work. It was always Marcus's safe harbor, his place to land when he needed something, or somewhere to stay if he was between places. I remember the day we first got the keys. Arthur's face, beaming. We built so many memories here. Laughter, quiet evenings, family dinners. I used to joke with Marcus, sort of. I'd say, "My son, this place, it holds all our family's memories. It's our foundation, I meant it. It wasn't just walls and a roof to me. It was our history. I kept all the really important documents, all the vital papers, in Arthur's old metal box. It's a heavy, green thing, scratched and worn from years. Inside were the contracts for this very apartment, the deeds, all the bank statements from decades of our lives. It was our tangible history, proof of our efforts, our savings. Marcus, though, he never showed any interest in what he called this old-fashioned paperwork. He'd wave a dismissive hand, a casual shrug. For him, this house, our home, it was just an asset, just a commodity, something to be used, to be sold, to profit from. He didn't see the years, the love, the sacrifices held within these walls. He had no idea, absolutely no clue, that in those yellowed, brittle papers, the ones he dismissed so easily, it wasn't just the past that was written. It was his entire future, and mine too. It was a strange feeling, holding those papers in Arthur's old metal box, because right then I saw the past so clearly. Every sacrifice, every loan, every silent moment of giving. But also, it was like looking at the future, mine and Marcus's, all tangled up in those yellowed documents. And that future, well, it had been coming for a while, hadn't it? Building up, slowly, almost without me noticing, until it hit me hard in that hospital room. Marcus, my son, he used to come by often, especially right after Arthur died. He'd sit, we'd talk, even if it was mostly about his plans. But in recent years, rare. And when he did show up, it was always a blur. He'd arrive with Chloe, his wife, a pretty woman, always impeccably dressed and perfectly put together. They'd barely even sit down. It was like they were just passing through, ticking a box. And their conversations? Always, always about the same few things. A new surefire investment that needed an influx of cash. An unexpected credit card debt that had to be paid off immediately. The ever-increasing school fees for their children, my grandchildren. I'd listen, nodding, my heart sinking a little each time. I felt it so deeply, you know? I felt like an ATM, not a mother. Just a machine dispensing money. The coldness, at distant, almost impatient look in Marcus's eyes. It was becoming clearer and clearer, more visible every time I saw him. Like I was just a means to an end. And Chloe, she started making these subtle comments about the apartment. Just little things, you know, but they cut deep. She'd look around, her gaze lingering on the walls, on my old furniture. "Mother-in-law," she'd say, her voice so sweet, almost syrupy, "this place is just so big for you, don't you think? It must be so much work to clean." Then she'd suggest, ever so casually, that I move to a smaller, more practical place, somewhere easier to manage, less upkeep, and that they, of course, could manage the property for me. Just help me out, you know? I'd always change the subject, fast. A sudden question about their day, a remark about the weather, anything to shift the conversation away. But a sharp pang of anguish, a twist in my stomach, would hit me every time. It felt like they were measuring my space, looking at every corner with a calculating eye, just waiting for me to leave it, to vacate it for them. It was a terrible feeling, like I was already gone, already an empty space. The final straw, the one that really broke something inside me, was on my birthday, my 78th birthday. You'd think a birthday would be different, wouldn't you? A day for family. A day for just being together. They promised a family lunch, a real celebration. I spent the morning getting ready, even put on the dress Marcus bought me years ago. I waited and waited. Then, just an hour before they were supposed to arrive, Marcus called. His voice quick and apologetic. They had to cancel, he said. An unavoidable business trip had come up. Something urgent. My heart just dropped. But I told him it was fine. I understood. I always understood, didn't I? That night, later, I was just scrolling on social media. You know, looking at pictures. Something I do when I feel a bit lonely. And I saw a photo of them. Marcus and Chloe. They were toasting, laughing, at this incredibly expensive restaurant in the very same city, not on a business trip at all. The lie, it hurt. It hurt so much more than them just forgetting me, more than them just not showing up. It was the deliberate deception. The thought that they didn't even care enough to be honest. It was then, seeing that picture, seeing their happy, oblivious faces, that the true loneliness began to set in. It wasn't just being alone in the house anymore. It was feeling completely invisible. Erased, really. Invisible to the two people who should have seen me most. The ones I had given everything to. And it made me wonder what else they were hiding. What else I didn't see. The feeling of being invisible, of being erased. It festered, even as I was finally leaving that hospital. I was still so weak, my legs a little shaky, my body aching in places I hadn't realized. The rideshare driver, a quiet young man, just dropped me off right at the entrance to my building. The same building I had called home for decades. The street looked familiar. The trees Arthur and I used to admire, the old brickwork. Everything was the same, but I felt utterly, completely different. I just wanted to be home in my own space, to pull the quiet around me like a blanket. I pushed open the heavy main door, walked down a familiar hallway, and fumbled with my keys at my apartment door. It felt heavy in my hand. One turn, another, and then I stepped inside. The scene that hit me, right there, just inside my own front door. It felt like a physical blow. It paralyzed my feet on the polished floorboards. My breath caught in my throat. Marcus and Chloe were in my living room, right there. And they weren't alone. A third person, a woman I didn't know, stood with them. She held a notepad and had that sleek, professional look. A realtor. My eyes darted from her to Marcus, then to Chloe. They were talking in low voices, quiet whispers that hummed with a strange energy. Their heads turned from one wall to another, their hands gesturing subtly. They were visually measuring the rooms, my rooms, and they were discussing something. I couldn't quite make out the words at first, but then I heard Chloe's voice, a little too loud, clear as a bell, talking about the excellent sales potential of the property. My property, my home. The humiliation, it hit me immediately. A wave of it, silent and burning. It was brutal. Standing there, an outsider in my own home, watching them dissecting my life, calculating its worth. It was like I was already gone, already a ghost. When they finally noticed me, standing there, still by the door, there was no surprise on their faces. Not a flicker of it. Just this slight, uncomfortable shift. A moment of awkwardness. Marcus, he quickly put on his concerned voice, the one he used when he needed something or when he wanted to smooth things over. "Mom, you shouldn't have left the hospital alone," he said. His tone was laced with feigned concern, so fake it almost made me laugh if I hadn't felt so hollow. "We were just looking at some ideas to modernize the apartment for your comfort." For my comfort. The lie was so transparent. The realtor, the unknown woman, she just looked at me. Her eyes, held a deep, knowing pity. She understood. She knew exactly what was happening here. She saw me, and in that look, I knew I was being evicted, not just from this house, but from my own life. Right there, right before my very eyes. They weren't even trying to hide it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears, too sharp for noise. It was a cold, quiet ache that settled in my chest. I just stood there, still by the door, and my voice, when it came out, was barely a whisper. "What is happening?" I asked. It wasn't a demand. It was just a question born of a profound bewilderment. Chloe, always the more direct one, stepped forward. Her smile, if you could call it that, didn't reach her eyes. Her voice was calm, almost soothing, but it had an edge of finality. "Eleanor, darling, let's be practical." Practical. That word again. Always practical. You had a health scare, a serious one. You're simply not capable of living here alone anymore. It's too much for you. We've already been looking at an excellent senior living facility for you. It has nurses, round-the-clock care, activities. It will be so much better for your safety. My safety, my comfort, my future. They had already decided it all. In my own home. Without me. My entire life, planned and sealed, in a conversation I wasn't even invited to. I looked from Chloe to Marcus, whose face was carefully blank, avoiding my gaze. In that exact moment, watching them, hearing their words, I realized something with a terrible clarity. I wasn't their mother anymore. I wasn't even a person. I was just an obstacle, a problem to be managed, an old woman to be moved aside so they could get what they wanted. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't the end of their plans. It was just the beginning. I felt it, a cold, hard knot of resolve forming where my heart used to be. The pain was immense, but it was also a spark, a dark, quiet spark. I just turned, somehow, and walked to my room. I closed the door softly behind me. The click of the latch, a tiny punctuation mark on the chaos I'd just witnessed. And I took a deep, shaky breath. 1, 2, 3. Trying to calm the tremor in my hands, the frantic flutter in my chest. The pain, it was immense. A tidal wave of betrayal, of humiliation. But then, almost like a counterwave, the clarity, that sharp, cutting clarity I had felt in the hospital, it rushed back. And it came back with full, blinding force. I sat on the edge of my bed, the old quilt familiar under my fingers. The image of them in my living room with the realtor, their faces eager, their voices hushed with greed. It played over and over in my mind, and it connected perfectly, seamlessly, to Marcus's cold voice on the phone, telling me I'm busy, while I was lying in a hospital bed, wondering if I would live or die. Suddenly, horrifyingly, everything made sense. They weren't worried about my health. Not at all. They weren't concerned for my well-being. They were just in a terrible hurry, a terrible, impatient hurry to take possession of what they believed was their inheritance. My home, my life. They saw it as theirs, just waiting for me to step aside. I wasn't their mother. I was an asset to be liquidated. The next day, I woke up with a quiet resolve. It wasn't anger that drove me. Not anymore. It was a kind of serene determination. The calm of someone who had spent a lifetime planning lessons, preparing for every possibility, structuring knowledge. As a teacher, I learned the power of information, the importance of facts, and the art of presentation. I had to approach this like I was preparing for the most important lesson of my life. A lesson for them. My first step was simple. I called Mr. Henderson. He's been our family lawyer for over 40 years. Since before Marcus was even born, he was more than just a lawyer. He was a loyal friend of my late husband, Arthur. A man of integrity, always quiet, always precise. I trusted him completely, implicitly. He was a rock. I explained very little on the phone, just that I needed to see him at my house for an urgent and discreet conversation. His voice was calm, reassuring as always. He simply said, "Eleanor, I'll be there tomorrow afternoon." I didn't say a word to Marcus or Chloe about the call. Not a hint. I didn't change my routine. I still tended to my plants. I still read my books. But now, as I moved through the apartment, I moved with a different kind of awareness. I listened. Marcus and Chloe were still here, behaving as if they were already the new owners of the house. They walked around, pointing, discussing things loudly. "This wall could come down here," Chloe would say, gesturing grandly. "And we can definitely replace all this outdated furniture." Marcus would nod, agreeing, talking about contractors, about potential buyers, about how much they could get for the place. They didn't even bother to whisper. They talked about my home, my cherished belongings, as if I wasn't even there, as if I was already gone. They didn't see me, and that, ironically, became my greatest advantage. They underestimated me completely. While I waited for Mr. Henderson, I went to Arthur's old metal box, the heavy green one. It sits under the bed, always has, a silent guardian of our life together. I pulled it out, dusted off the top, and slowly, carefully, opened the clasp. The faint smell of old paper, of history, rose from inside. Inside, right there, nestled among other important family papers, was the original deed to this apartment. The document that proved Arthur and I had bought it years ago. But that wasn't all. Underneath it, neatly organized and meticulously kept, were all the proofs of payments I had made for Marcus. Over 30 years of them. Receipts for university tuition, bank transfers for his failed businesses, the promissory notes he never paid back, signed by his own hand, gathering dust, the statements from the second mortgage, the one I took out, the one I paid off all by myself, year after year, penny by painful penny, while he pursued his fleeting ventures. Each document was a small piece of my sacrifice, my unspoken love. I wasn't just gathering evidence for a fight, not really. This wasn't about revenge. It was about something far more profound. I was organizing the facts of my own life, the truth of my sacrifices, the undeniable record of everything I had done, everything I had given. It was all there in black and white, and it was all mine. A story written not with words, but with decades of quiet, determined action. And soon, I knew this story would finally be told. The days that followed felt like I was living under a dark, heavy cloud. It was a suffocating psychological pressure. Marcus and Chloe, they had settled into this strange routine. They moved through my home as if I wasn't there, or perhaps as if I was just a ghost, an inconvenience. Marcus, my own son, began to treat my belongings as if they weren't mine at all. He'd walk into my room or the living room and just start. He'd pick up old photo frames, the ones with pictures of Arthur and me, or of Marcus as a child. Pictures that were my memories. He'd sigh, shake his head, and then set them aside. "These will go to storage," he'd announce, not asking, just stating it. Too much clutter. My life, my memories reduced to clutter. Chloe, she was just as bad, maybe even worse in her subtle ways. She already talked about replacing my furniture. My comfortable armchair, the antique chest of drawers, the small sturdy table where I drank my morning coffee. She called it outdated. Every word was a chipping away at my sense of belonging. They didn't just walk past me. They walked through me. They talked about renovations, about new styles, about how much more modern the apartment would look. It was like they were already erasing me, piece by piece, from the very space I had built my life in. They treated me like a stubborn child, a difficult elder who just didn't understand what was good for her. A senile woman who needed to be looked after for her own good, always for my own good. Then the calls started. Calls from other relatives. My nieces and nephews, they'd always been good to me, kind, but now their voices had a strange, careful edge. It was clear, so very clear, that Marcus had been talking to them. He was painting a picture, a false one, about my health, my ability to live alone. They'd call to ask how I was, of course, but then, subtly, the conversation would turn. Aunt Eleanor, my niece Sarah, a sweet girl usually, would say, her voice soft but insistent, "We've been talking, and we really think it's for your best. An assisted living facility. There you'll have 24-hour care. Someone always there if you need them. It's the best for your safety." My nephew Tom called too. He told me about all the activities they had. "You won't be lonely, Auntie. You'll have friends." They were all echoing the same line, the same suggestions. I felt completely surrounded, like invisible threads were being woven around me, tightening and tightening, to immobilize me, to pull me into their predetermined future. A web of lies, carefully constructed. The peak of my anguish, the moment that truly pierced through my quiet resolve, happened one evening. I was in my room, the door slightly ajar. I heard Marcus and Chloe talking in the hallway, their voices low, but clear enough for me to catch the words. Marcus was frustrated. "It's only a matter of time until she gives in," he said, his voice impatient, clipped. "The doctor said her memory might fail. We'll speed up the conservatorship if necessary." The word conservatorship, it echoed in the quiet of my room. It sounded like a sentence, a final judgment. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It wasn't just about my money. They didn't just want my house. They wanted to erase my voice. They wanted to take away my will, my existence, to decide everything for me. to make me disappear completely. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. But as I sat there, listening to them plot my future as if I were already gone, a different kind of feeling began to stir. A quiet, burning certainty. They didn't know. They didn't know the Portuguese teacher. They didn't know she still had one last crucial lesson to teach, and it was going to be the most important one of my life. They didn't know the Portuguese teacher. They didn't know she still had one last crucial lesson to teach, and it was going to be the most important one of my life. I scheduled the meeting for a Tuesday afternoon. I picked that day carefully. It was when Marcus usually had his important business calls. So it was less likely he'd have an excuse to be too busy. I called Marcus first, keeping my voice calm, almost detached. "Marcus," I said, "I've made a decision about the future. I want to communicate it to you and Chloe, and I'd like Mr. Henderson to be present." I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. I heard the slight shift in his breathing, the quick intake of air. He must have thought I was finally giving in. Chloe, he said, would be there too. They arrived precisely on time, which was unusual for them. Chloe wore a bright, almost triumphant smile, and Marcus had the self-satisfied smirk on his face, like he'd won a chess game. They were practically radiating victory. They walked into my living room, the one they had discussed selling, the one where they had mentally tossed out my furniture and replaced it with their own. They sat down on my sofa, the very one Chloe had called outdated and planned to throw out, leaning back as if they already owned it. They waited, anxious, but clearly certain that I had finally given in. Their eyes held a mixture of impatience and thinly veiled excitement, eager for my surrender. Mr. Henderson, quiet and dignified as ever, sat beside me, his briefcase resting neatly on his lap. I took it. Was firm, controlled. I looked directly into their eyes, not at their faces, but into their eyes. I wanted them to see me, really see me. "I have indeed made a decision about the future of this house," I said, my voice steady and clear. It resonated in the quiet room. Mr. Henderson, by my side, slowly, deliberately, opened a folder he had brought. The faint rustle of papers filled the sudden silence. "This apartment," I continued, my gaze unwavering, "the one you are in such a hurry to sell, was bought by Arthur and me with our hard-earned money. We built a life here, raised a family." I paused, letting that sink in. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Chloe's smile wavered a bit. "But what you don't know," I went on, the words flowing with a quiet power, "is that 10 years ago, after paying it off in full, I placed this apartment into an exclusive trust fund. A trust fund entirely in my name. Legally, it is now immune from seizure. It cannot be touched by any debt, any lawsuit, any external claim." I watched their faces. Marcus's jaw tightened. Chloe's eyes widened, a flicker of something unreadable passing through them. "And," I finished, letting the weight of the last part settle, "it can only be sold with my express authorization." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It was the absolute, undeniable truth. The silence in the room became heavy, suffocating. It hung in the air, thick with unspoken words, with dawning realization. It was the kind of silence that screams louder than any shout. Marcus's face went pale. Chloe's perfectly composed expression crumbled, replaced by utter shock, her mouth slightly open. They looked at Mr. Henderson, then back at me, as if waiting for me to laugh, to say it was all a joke. But my face was serious, my resolve unwavering. Then, slowly, I reached beside me, picked up a thick white envelope, and handed it to Marcus. His hand trembled slightly as he took it. Inside, there was no money, no check, nothing he would expect. Instead, it was an extrajudicial notification, clearly drafted by Mr. Henderson, with all the legal language, all the official stamps. He pulled out the paper, his eyes scanning the lines. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with disbelief. The document stated, plainly, unequivocally, that he and his wife had exactly 30 days to remove all their personal belongings from my home, and to return the keys they had made without my permission. There were no shouts, no dramatic outbursts, no tears, from me anyway. Just the truth, clear and irrefutable, laid bare, and the absolute shock on the faces of those who had always seen me as a resource, a bank account, an inconvenience, and never, not once, as a person, as their mother. Their silence was my answer. My quiet dignity was my victory. They finally saw me, and they didn't like what they saw. Not at all. I felt a strange lightness in my chest, a space opening up where the heavy knot of pain used to be. The lesson was given, but the story, my story, was just beginning a whole new chapter. The weeks that followed were filled with a silence I hadn't known in decades. It wasn't the heavy, crushing silence I had lived with before, the one filled with unsaid words and unfulfilled hopes. No, this was a liberating silence, a light, airy quiet that settled over the apartment, washing away the tension that had clung to every corner. My home, this place that had become a battlefield of wills, returned to being my refuge, my sanctuary. The first thing I did was change the locks, all of them. It felt symbolic, a simple act of reclaiming my space, my boundaries. Then, little by little, I started to reorganize each room, not in a frantic way, but slowly, mindfully. I touched every object, every book, every photo frame, putting them back in their rightful place, a place of affection, not just a place on a shelf. It was like dusting off my own life, removing the layers of expectations and burdens that others had piled on me. The air itself seemed lighter, cleaner, as if a window had finally been thrown open after a long, stuffy winter. For the first time in so many years, I wasn't waiting. I wasn't waiting for a call to solve someone else's problem, to lend money, to smooth over a crisis. I was simply living. In this newfound calm, I found myself reaching out. I reconnected with Sarah, my great-niece. She's a lovely young woman, an art student, always had a gentle heart and a genuine affection for me. I hadn't seen much of her lately, caught up in my own quiet struggles. I invited her to spend weekends here at the apartment, and the sound of her laughter, bright and clear, filled the house with new life. It was a beautiful sound, so different from the hushed, calculating whispers I had We'd talk for hours about her art, about her dreams, and she'd listen patiently to my stories, not with boredom, but with genuine curiosity. During one of her visits, I told her about my decision. I also changed my will. It wasn't a snap decision, but one that had grown slowly, surely, in my heart. The apartment, this home that had held so much of my past, would now be hers, but with a condition, a legacy really. She could never sell it. Instead, I asked her to transform it, to turn it into a space to support other young artists without resources. A place where creativity could flourish, where dreams could be nurtured, not sold off. My legacy, I realized, would finally have a purpose, a true, meaningful purpose, not just a price tag. It would be a foundation for life, not just an asset. My life, it didn't become luxurious, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it became something far more precious. It became dignified. The quiet peace settled deep within me. I even found myself returning to my first love, teaching. I started giving voluntary, private lessons, just a few hours a week, to young people in the community who needed a little help with Portuguese. It felt good to use my mind, to share my knowledge, to see understanding light up in their eyes. My routine is simple now. I wake with the sun, or close to it. I tend to my plants on the porch, feeling the cool morning air, watching the world wake up. I prepare my coffee calmly, savoring the aroma. Then I sit on the porch with a book in my lap and I read. Or sometimes I just sit and watch the city, the people, the sky, and I feel this deep, steady peace. The peace of knowing that my future, my home, my roof over my head, it all depends only on me, on my own choices. I didn't need anything else, just myself, just the quiet clarity of my own existence. My life, it's simple now, dignified. I have my routine, my plants, my books. I have Sarah's laughter filling the house and the quiet satisfaction of teaching again. Just the quiet clarity of my own existence. It feels like the air itself breathes easier around me. And when I look back at my story, at all the years that led me to this moment, I see so many things now, things I couldn't see before. When I was caught up in the powerful, sometimes overwhelming current of what I thought love was, I see how many times I just erased myself, how I made myself smaller and smaller, almost disappearing so that others, especially Marcus, could be bigger. I remember selling the car, mortgaging this house a second time, giving up my entire pension savings. All of it, every last bit, was for him. For what I truly believed was love. For what I believed with all my heart was being a good mother. I thought if I gave everything, if I sacrificed enough, if I was always there, always providing, that love would be returned in kind, that my devotion would be seen, would be valued, would protect me. But it wasn't love they truly wanted, not really. It was just a resource, a bottomless well, they hoped, of money and convenience, ready to be tapped whenever they needed. I made myself invisible through my unending giving, and slowly, surely, they simply stopped seeing me at all. I became a blurred background. And that silent sacrifice? Oh, how many times it was mistaken for weakness, for naivety even, for utter stupidity. They truly thought I was fragile, that I was senile, that I would just give in at the first sign of pressure. They thought I was incapable of living alone, not because I was genuinely incapable, but because it suited their plans to believe it. It made it easier for them to justify what they were doing. They thought they could walk all over me, that my history, my memories, my very voice meant nothing, that they could erase my presence from my own home, from my own life. Painful irony, isn't it? The person who quietly built the very foundation, the one who held everything together, was the one they ultimately saw as disposable. They confused my quiet giving for a complete lack of will, a total absence of personal power. They didn't realize that deep down, a quiet, unyielding strength was always there, just waiting for the right moment to bloom. Today, I understand something so profoundly simple, yet it took me nearly 8 decades of living and a great deal of pain to truly grasp it. Setting boundaries, drawing a clear line in the sand, it isn't an act of selfishness at all. Not even close. It's an act of pure self-preservation. It's about protecting your own dignity. My life has intrinsic value. My story matters, just as much as yours. It's about insisting on your own presence, on your own humanity, even and especially when others try to diminish it, to erase you. It's about finally saying, I am here. I am still here. And I deserve respect, simply because I am a living, breathing person. And you, sitting there, listening to my story, has any part of it resonated with you? Have you ever felt that way in your own life? Have you ever felt like you were just an inconvenience in the life of someone for whom you were a lifelong foundation? Someone you supported, nurtured, built up with your efforts and your love. Did you ever pour your heart and soul into someone, only to feel, in return, that your very presence was just a problem to be solved, a hurdle to be overcome, an old thing to be replaced? Has your presence, your unique story, all the years of your life, all your experiences, the ones who should cherish your history, your wisdom, your love, your very being? It's a painful question to consider, I know, but it's one we all need to ask ourselves, perhaps, no matter our age, no matter our path in this world, because every story has value. Every single life deserves to be seen, truly seen, for what it is. Every person deserves to be respected. And sometimes, in those quiet, desperate moments, we are the only ones who can truly insist on that for ourselves. It's a lesson I learned late, but one I now hold dear. It's a lesson I learned late, but one I now hold dear. And this lesson, this understanding, it's not just a thought in my head. It's something I live now, every single day. My life, it breathes differently. The quiet that fills my home isn't an empty quiet anymore. It's a quiet rich with my own presence, my own choices, my own peace. The air, it's clearer, lighter, as if a window has truly been opened in my soul, letting in the fresh breeze of self-respect. I still wake with the sun, or sometimes a little before it. I make my way to the kitchen, prepare my coffee, slowly, thoughtfully. The aroma fills the apartment, a simple comfort. It reminds me that true life, is about growth, about nurturing, not about taking or demanding or consuming. It's a reflection of the peace I now feel within myself. I sit on my porch. It all just is, and I am simply here, present, visible to myself, which I've learned is the most important visibility of all. My future, my roof over my head, my daily rhythm, it all depends only on me, on my choices, on the quiet strength I finally rediscovered. I didn't need anything else, just myself, just the quiet clarity of my own existence, unburdened by others' expectations or demands. The apartment, it feels like my own skin now, a perfect fit. It's no longer a place of sacrifice, but a space where my legacy is slowly, quietly taking root. Sarah, my great niece, she comes by often now. Her laughter is a melody in these rooms. We talk about her art, about the dreams she has for this place, turning it into a haven for other young artists. It warms my heart knowing that the years of my life, the love I poured into this home, will continue to grow, to nurture, to inspire. It will be a foundation for life, for creativity, for kindness, not just an asset to be sold. This dignity, this quiet purpose, it means everything to me. It's the true inheritance, the one money can't buy. And you, sitting there, listening to my story, has any part of it resonated with you? Have you ever felt that way in your own life? Have you ever felt like you were just an inconvenience in the life of someone for whom you were a lifelong foundation? Someone you supported, nurtured, built up with your efforts and your love? Did you ever pour your heart and soul into someone, only to feel in return that your very presence was just a problem to be solved, a hurdle to be overcome, an old thing to be replaced? Has your presence? It's a painful question to consider, I know, but it's one we all need to ask ourselves, perhaps, no matter our age, no matter our path in this world, because every story has value. Every single life deserves to be seen, truly seen, for what it is. Every person deserves to be respected, and sometimes, in those quiet, desperate moments, we are the only ones who can truly insist on that for ourselves. It's a lesson I learned late, but one I now hold dear. And speaking of being seen and staying connected, in these modern times, with all these online spaces where we share our thoughts and listen to each other's stories, well, it reminds me of something important I've heard. If you want to continue receiving real stories like this, stories that perhaps resonate with your own heart, stories that remind us we're not alone in these quiet battles, pay attention. YouTube might be unsubscribing you without warning. So if you feel a connection here, if you find solace or unders,